Good afternoon and welcome to Wednesday Workshops with Whitney. I might wait a minute to get started. Oh, great. Hey, Modansi, happy that you're here. All right, well, I guess I'll go ahead and get started. So, welcome to Wednesday Workshops with Whitney. My name is Whitney, and I will be your host. Today, we're going to be talking about the positive connection between hope, behaviors, and happiness. But before we get started, we do our icebreaker, and what I found, actually what I thought I would share, is called the Adult State Hope Scale that was developed in 1996 by Snyder. So might be outdated, but I thought we'd go through this. So read each item carefully. Using the scale shown below, please select the number that best describes how you think about yourself right now and put that number in the blank before each sentence. Please take a few moments to focus on yourself and what is going on in your life at this moment. Once you have this here and now set, go ahead and answer each item according to the following scale. So it's 6 questions. I know you don't have a copy of it, but I'm just going to go through it. So when I say these comments, what you do is you score how you feel about it from 1. So 1 is definitely false. 2 is mostly false. 3 is somewhat false. 4 is slightly false. 5 is slightly true. 6, somewhat true. 7, mostly true. And 8, definitely true. So we'll go through this. I'm gonna count it for myself, but this is the Adult State Hope Scale. So if you want to write it down, you can. If not, it's okay. But I thought this was just cool and different. All right, number 1. So this is how much how you think about yourself right now. So like how much this is like you or not like you. Number 1, if I should find myself in a jam, I could think of many ways to get out of it. If I should find myself in a jam, I could think of many ways to get out of it. So 1, definitely false. 2, mostly false. 3, somewhat false. 4, slightly false. 5, slightly true. 6, somewhat true. 7, mostly true. Or 8, definitely true. If I should find myself in a jam, I could think of many ways to get out of it. Okay. Number 2. At the present time, I am energetically pursuing my goals. 1, definitely false. 2, mostly false. 3, somewhat false. 4, slightly false. 5, slightly true. 6, somewhat true. 7, mostly true. Or 8, definitely true. That at the present time, I am energetically pursuing my goals. I know what's interesting about this scale is normally there's a point in the middle that's kind of like neutral, but I guess what would be the point of that? All right, number 3. There are lots of ways around any problem that I'm facing now. There are lots of ways around any problem that I am facing now. Definitely false, 1. 2, mostly false. 3 somewhat false, 4 slightly false, 5 slightly true, 6 somewhat true, 7 mostly true, or 8 definitely true. And that was, there are lots of ways around any problem that I'm facing right now. And there's no judgment in this, because like we're not going to share our answers. It's really about understanding how you're feeling in this present moment. And it can change. So, and not to judge it based on how you think you should be. Number 4, right now, I see myself as being pretty successful. 1, definitely false. 2, mostly false. 3, somewhat false. 4, slightly false. 5, slightly true. 6, somewhat true. 7, mostly true. Or 8, definitely true. That right now I see myself as being pretty successful. All right, we got 2 more. Number 5, I can think of many ways to reach my current goals. 1, definitely false. 2, mostly false. 3, somewhat false. 4, slightly false. 5, slightly true. 6, somewhat true. 7, mostly true. Or 8, definitely true. That I can think of many ways to reach my current goals. And number 6, at this time, I am meeting the goals that I have set for myself. 1, definitely false. 2, mostly false. 3, somewhat false. 4, slightly false. 5, slightly true. 6, somewhat true. 7, mostly true. Or 8, definitely true. That at this time, I am meeting the goals that I have set for myself. All right. So, I feel like this scale is like, now I'm like, oh my God, what goals should I be having? Do I have enough goals? Like, it made me kind of start judging myself a bit. All right, so I guess what you do is add items 1, 3, and 5. Oh, there's different subscores. That's interesting. All right, so 1, if I look at 1, 3, and 5. Okay. Said scores on this subscale can range from 3 to 24, with higher scores indicating higher levels of pathways thinking. Agency subscore, add items 2, 4, and 6. Scores on this subscale can range from 3 to 24, with higher scores indicating higher levels of agency thinking, which I'm not sure what that means. But total hope score, add the pathways and agency subscales together. Okay. Scores can range from 6 to 48, with higher scores representing higher hope levels. So I guess what I like about scales, like sometimes, you know, like scales of happiness or mood in general, is it's okay if you're kind of low at one point. It's kind of like, I think measuring things can be great because, you know, maybe there's certain things you'd like to work on. And as you work on them, you can take the quiz again and see kind of where you're moving. So I thought that was interesting. It was called the Adult State Hope Scale. All right. So moving on. Oh, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to type them in the comments box, or I have Modensi texting me. So also, if you want to text me, this is my number, my work number. Okay. So one of my coworkers sent me this article, and I thought it was really interesting. So we're going to read through this article and discuss. It's called Hope Can Help People Feel Happier, Protect Them from Risky Behaviors. And then after that, I wanted to talk a little bit about how do we build hope or increase our hope after that. And then we will finish with a mindfulness exercise called naming the feelings. All right. Having hope for the future could protect people from risky behaviors such as drinking and gambling, according to new research from the University of East Anglia. Researchers studied relative deprivation, which is the feeling that other people have things better than you in life. So that's when you compare yourself to others and you feel like you're a lot lesser. But that is always an opinion too. So we got to be careful with that because that kind of goes back to the cognitive distortions that we talked about last time. They wanted to find out why only some people experience this feeling, or some people experiencing this feeling turn to escapist and risky behaviors such as drinking alcohol, taking drugs, overeating, or gambling, while others do not. And they found that the answer lies in hope. I think most people have experienced relative deprivation or the feeling that other people have things better than you in life at some point in their lives. It's that feeling of being unhappy with your lot or maybe where you're at, the belief that your situation is worse than others, that other people are doing better than you. Sometimes you might compare yourself to other people in your age group even. Like, I should have, reach this milestone. But really, it's all about our individual paths. And sometimes our paths are different than other people's paths. And that's okay. Okay. And that other people are doing better than you. Roosevelt famously said that comparison is the thief of joy. I think that's a great quote. Because if you compare yourself to others, how are you going to be happy? It's that feeling you have when a friend buys a new car, or your sister gets married, or a colleague finds a better job or has a better income. Relative deprivation, or I keep just saying the definition over and over again to get it in my head, but I think it's important. The feeling that other people have things better than you in life can trigger negative emotions like anger and resentment, and it has been associated with poor coping strategies like risk-taking, drinking, taking drugs, or gambling. But not everyone scoring high on measures of relative deprivation use negative coping skills. We wanted to find out why some people seem to cope better or even use the experience to their advantage to improve their own situation. There is a lot of evidence to show that remaining hopeful in the face of adversity can be advantageous. So we wanted to see if hope can help people feel happier with their lot and buffer against risky behaviors, which was said by Shahryar Kesavars, postgraduate researcher, UEA School of Psychology. The research team carried out 2 lab test-based experiments with 55 volunteers. The volunteers were quizzed to find out how much they feel relative deprivation and hope. The researchers also induced feelings of relative deprivation in the volunteers by telling them how deprived they were compared to their peers based on a questionnaire about their family income, age, and gender. I don't know, this sounds interesting. They then took part in specially designed gambling games that involved risk, taking and placing bets with a chance to win real money. The aim of this part of the study was to see whether feeling relatively deprived, elicited by the knowledge that one has less income than others, causes greater risk-taking among low hopers and decreased risk-taking among high hopers. We looked at the people who scored high for relative deprivation, the ones that thought their situation in life was worse than those around them. And we looked at those who also scored high for hope. We found that the volunteers who scored high for hope were much less likely to take risks in the game. Those who weren't too hopeful were a lot more likely to take risks, says Dr. Piers Fleming, UEA School of Psychology. Another experiment looked at whether hope helped people in the real world. They worked with 122 volunteers who had gambled at least once in the last year. The volunteers took part in questionnaires to gauge how hopeful they are, whether they felt relatively deprived, and to measure problem gambling. Of the participants, 33 had no gambling problems, which was 27%. 32 had low level of problems, which was 26%. 46 had moderate level problems leading to some negative consequences, which is 38%, and 11 were problem gamblers with a possible loss of control, which was 9%. What's interesting about this is that 46 had moderate level of problems leading to some negative consequences. So of the people that had gambled at least once in the past year, 38% had a moderate level of problems from gambling. So that was interesting because that's close. It's not half, but it's close. It's the highest percentage of the group. Mr. Kijavar said, when we looked at these scores compared to scores for hope and relative deprivation, we found that increased hope was associated with a decreased likelihood of losing control of gambling behavior, even in those who experience relative deprivation. Interestingly, our study found no significant relation between hope and gambling severity among relatively privileged persons. We don't know why this is, but it could be that they are gambling recreationally or better able to stop when the fun stops. Kijavar's postgraduate researcher. The research team said that nurturing hope in people who are unhappy with their lot could protect them against harmful behaviors like drinking and gambling. So, that was an interesting article. I don't know if anyone has any opinions about it. I think it's interesting because I know for me growing up, like the big thing was don't compare yourself to others because it really can make you unhappy. So I try not to do that in general. It's hard not to, especially if you're not feeling great about where you're at in your life. But I don't think anything good really ever comes out of it. But that's just my opinion. So now let's move on to how to become more hopeful. This article is by Elizabeth Hopper, PhD, and I found it on healthpsych.com. So, hope in times of adversity is how it starts. Psychologists have found that there are many ways we can work to keep up hope in stressful and overwhelming situations. Perhaps the first step is to acknowledge the reality that there's always hope. Let me repeat that. There's always hope, no matter how difficult or dire a situation may seem. Thoughts and feelings connected to hopelessness are almost always tied to some type of cognitive distortion that's skewing reality, with the common one being what's known as fortune telling or jumping to conclusions, which I like because I talked about this stuff last time. This type of cognitive distortion involves making a negative prediction about the future, even when facts don't warrant such a conclusion. So kind of like always believing the worst is going to happen, even if there's no proof that the worst is going to happen, or in your life the worst hasn't possibly happened. And being convinced that this prediction is fact, when really it's fiction. An example of this kind of cognitive distortion might be someone making a small mistake at work and assuming they'll be fired as a result. I've definitely felt that way before. Even though their boss has been reasonable and understanding when coworkers have made similar mistakes. Even in extreme circumstances, such as being diagnosed with a terminal illness, hope can still play a powerful role. The fact remains that nobody, not even the best doctors, can predict the exact course the disease might take. For example, there are thousands of examples of individuals defying all odds and going into remission or living much longer than expected. Psychiatrist and best-selling author of The Feel-Good Handbook, David Burns, points out that hope can also promote well-being among individuals who have received a terminal illness. Burns explores this very experience with a woman he knows who has just been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Oh, geez. Over the course of a live therapy session, she emerges much more hopeful and positive than when she started, even amidst the troubling uncertainty of her diagnosis. So that's interesting. It's important to remember that loss of hope is the result of cognitive distortion, or the stinking thinking, a biased way of viewing a situation based on what one has learned in the past, which may be in part fueled by biochemical imbalance that requires treatment. So sometimes there is a chemical imbalance in your brain. Hope is about the future, and technically speaking, it remains wide open and full of possibility. Yes, there are constraints throughout life, but there are also many more creative options yet to be discovered, so never forget that. So as you can see, this person is very optimistic. And sometimes when you are faced with adversity or negative things that happen in your life, it is hard to feel optimistic. But let's hope that she has some guidance on how to increase hope. So next, tools for cultivating hope. And if any of you have any skills, coping skills, or any ways that you find it easier to feel hopeful, or how to increase your own hope, feel free to share. I always appreciate that. Psychology professor Everett Worthington recommends seeking out inspirational media, such as a favorite podcast, and finding heroes of hope. I like that. Heroes of hope to turn to when we're feeling stuck or uninspired. He gives the examples of Nelson Mandela and Katherine Johnson, the mathematician who inspired the film Hidden Figures. You can also start compiling a list of inspirational media and writing down your hope heroes now so that they're available to refer back to later. So I like that they're kind of like, why don't you write some down now? Because when you think about, once you say, oh, Nelson Mandela, then you're like, what? Gandhi, or certain people that have gone through a lot of adversity and still just kept going and had so much hope. Read about or listen to how these hope heroes, or how these folks faced and overcame adversity against all odds. You will think and feel different after. When you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, keep in mind that building hope can start with a small step. In a blog post for Psychology Today, psychologist Karen Hall suggests breaking down a problem into small, manageable steps and reminds us that these small steps adds up. She also reminds us that simple activities, such as making your bed, can help us feel more confident and in control. I love that because when I was growing up, my dad always made me make my bed, and I'd be like, well, why do I have to make my bed if I'm coming back in it later? And it was kind of like he'd say that it would make me feel better about myself, and even if my room wasn't completely clean, it felt cleaner, and it kind of was like kind of represented, I guess, kind of me. And I think that is true. But I still, to this day, make my bed every morning. And it does actually make me feel better. It's also important to remember that building hope isn't something that you have to do alone. I like that. Psychotherapy can help to challenge cognitive distortions and replace them with more adaptive and hopeful ways of thinking. Snyder and his colleagues suggest that, and Snyder was the one that came up with this scale that we just did. So interesting. Snyder and his colleagues suggest that regardless of the type of therapy being practiced, a reason therapy works is because it increases hope. A therapist works to help their client find new ways of coping with their problems and find the motivation and confidence to work towards their goals. Ain't that the truth? Next, helping others become hopeful. According to Snyder and his colleagues, hope theory doesn't just apply to individuals. It can be used to understand groups as well. When we're facing pressing social issues, increasing hope can be beneficial to bring about change in the broader community. For example, education professor Sarah Stilson points out that it's important for teachers to inculcate a sense of political hope among students by helping students to learn about real-world issues and to find ways of challenging the status quo. She gives the example of Parkland students who lobbied for change in the aftermath of the tragedy at their school. Importantly, working to bring about change to help others can make us feel more hopeful as well. Writer Anne Lamott writes that working for environmental causes can counter the sense of overwhelm that we might feel when we think about large-scale problems such as climate change. Lamott explains that by showing up with hope to help others, I'm guaranteed that the hope is present. Oh, I love that. By showing up with hope to help others, I'm guaranteed that the hope is present. I'm like, I gotta highlight that. Because a lot of times, especially working in social services or enjoying to help others, we are instilling, because we're saying that if we believe that someone else can do better, or we just believe in that person to succeed, we're giving them hope, or we can. Then my own hope increases. By creating hope for others, I end up awash in this stuff. Similarly, in a blog post for Psychology Today, Philip Zimbardo and Rosemary Sword suggest that one way to become more hopeful is to help others and lobby for social change. For example, by volunteering, calling your elected representatives to voice support for causes that are important to you, or attending political marches. By showing up with hope to help others, I'm guaranteed that hope is present. Then my own hope increases. Oh, that was the thing. Okay, cool. And this goes on, well, yeah, that's all kind of like talking about politics, but just helping in general. Reading about Lamott, Sword, and Zimbardo's suggestions made me think of one of my own heroes of hope, Leslie Knope, from the show Parks and Recreation. In one episode, Leslie applies for a federal government grant to clean up a river in her town, only to find out that she can't meet with anyone in the person about her application. Instead, she is asked to leave her application in a bin with numerous other applications. Instead of waiting to hear if her grant application was approved, Leslie takes charge of the situation. She sets aside a weekly time and starts a river cleanup on her own. To me, this story seems to be the core of what hope is. Optimism might mean simply trusting that the grant will be funded, but hope means being motivated to find a plan B or plan C if things don't work out as you originally intended. In this context, working to foster feelings of hope in situations of stress and uncertainty doesn't just increase our own well-being, it helps us feel empowered to work towards a better future. Okay. All right, so that was some ideas of how to increase your hope. Lastly, I found, okay, this was another article that I had found. Okay, so your hope can be influenced and increased. There are 2 indicators or behaviors that help increase hope: healthy relationships and consistent self-care. Evaluate your relationships. Are they adding value to your life? Are they toxic or life-giving? How can you tell the difference? Not everyone has a luxury of barring poisonous people from their lives, but we can work to minimize the damage. We can voluntarily stop watching the news or limit our news intake, following someone on Facebook who may be negative, or taking breaks with someone at work who is a relentlessly negative person, which I'm sure we all have someone like that in our life who can never really see the bright side. It's always dark. We can choose to forgive a coworker, but not necessarily actively engage a person who has harmed us. Practical tip. If you want to increase your levels of hope, spend time with someone hopeful. Their hope will hopefully rub off on you. And I think that's a great tip, because they say sometimes, who are you surrounding yourself with? And I know I try to surround myself with people that are happy, hopeful, who have goals. So it's kind of like how you'd like to be, even if you're not that way, because kind of peer pressure definitely can happen. And if you're around a group of people that normalize behaviors that aren't healthy, you're more likely to participate in these behaviors. We all have needs. Do you know what you need from your friends and coworkers? Number 2, consistent self-care. Your hope can be increased by pursuing consistent self-care. Self-care is holistic. It involves our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. It is not an afterthought or something that randomly happens. Look at your digital or physical calendar. Do you have a regularly planned time to consider your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health? If not, you may have to be ruthless with your calendar and establish a self-care as a priority. Practical tip. If you want to increase your hope levels, then schedule times to rest intentionally, relax, recharge, and refocus. And along with that, it made me think of having hope for the future would be feeling hopeful that maybe you'll be healthy. So I think that it's important to make sure that we're seeing the doctor annually, or, going to the doctor if something seems wrong. But also the whole thing about preventative care is finding a doctor you like, which can be difficult sometimes, but that's part of taking care of yourself, is making sure that things are working in your body so that you can live longer. All right, so lastly, we have our meditation. And as always, if anyone has any questions, concerns, or comments, feel free to share. This is called Naming the Feelings. Naming the feelings. What emotions are beneath your thoughts right now? If you are able to, name these emotions out loud or write them down. So I'm going to walk us through this meditation. If you're sitting, try to sit up straight. You can put your hands on your legs or to the side. Keep your feet, try to have them flat on the floor. And if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes, but you never have to. Sit quietly for a few moments, settling into your seat. Notice the feeling of your breath entering and leaving your body. Notice the sounds around you, the sensations on your skin. the sensations within your body. Notice any thoughts that might be floating to the surface. Imagine these thoughts as icebergs. The thought is what we see above the surface of the water. Beneath the surface, the much larger part is an emotional or several. For example, if we're thinking about our long to-do list and how we're never going to get it all done, the emotion below the surface might be anxiety or even guilt. If we're struggling with an argument we had with a loved one, the underlying energy might be sadness or a feeling of abandonment. What emotions are beneath your thoughts right now? If you are able to, name these emotions out loud or write them down. When you notice the temptation to get lost in the story, such as I feel sad and I don't know what to do, and what if I tried talking to her, gently return to the emotion. I feel sad. I feel angry. I feel hurt. I feel lonely. Notice if there are any emotions lurking around that might feel less difficult. Is there any joy? Excitement? There is space for all these emotions to coexist. Every time a thought arises, name the emotion beneath it. That large, often unseen part of the iceberg. Continue naming the emotions until it feels as though you've named them all. Once you feel like you've named all your current resident emotions, don't worry if more pop up, it's never too late. See if you can feel where these emotions are living in your body. This is a practice that takes some time to establish, so be very patient with yourself. We are not accustomed to taking note of what we're feeling in our body unless it's acute pain or an open wound. One way to do this is to look for tingling or tightness. Emotions can also show up as fluttery feeling or a clenching, or you might feel actual physical pain. Try going through your slowly body bit by bit to keep things simple. Do you notice any sensation of emotion in your head, neck, and throat area? Your chest, upper back, the space around your head? Travel through our shoulders, your upper arms, your hands, your stomach area, lower belly and pelvis. Bring your consciousness to your seat and lower back, your legs, your feet. If you noticed any feelings in any of these places, observe them, but do not interact. Note them, but don't try to change anything. Be curious, but compassionate. It is human to have emotions. If we are alive, we are feeling them in our physical body. If we've been busy or preoccupied for some time, we may not have noticed these feelings until now, or we may not want to be experiencing these emotions. See if you can allow your feelings to just be there. See if you can pull up a chair next to the fluttering or the buzzing and experience it. Notice if any fear comes up around doing that, which is very natural. If something feels too traumatic or jarring and it doesn't feel safe to feel, please let it go now. Notice if there's a message your body or self needs to hear right now. It could be, I'm here. It might be, you are loved, or I am loved. Some other examples that might work. It is safe to feel this. You're doing your best in this moment. Forgiven. I am worthy. It may help to place a hand gently on your chest or stomach. Repeat this message to yourself gently and kindly until you noticed a shift. Then gently let it go. You can repeat this with as many feelings as you like. Cool. So that actually was similar to a body scan, which I really like. And that is it. Thank you all for coming. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to put them in the chat box, or you can email me. Or if you ever have any suggestions for topics, I appreciate it as well. So I hope that you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye. Oh, thank you, Donna. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Great. Thank you so much. Bye.